Welcome back to the Wicked Kitchen, guys. Today we have a Sarno staple. This is Nana's red sauce. This is the gravy that ties together so many of our dishes. Red sauce, fresh basil, cooked down tomatoes, absolutely delicious. Stick around, you don't want to miss this one. All right, so this is a tribute to our Italian grandma, our Nana. This is a sauce that no matter what time of day, there was always a pot of sauce on the stove. So this sauce, more than any other food out there that I prepare, brings me back to childhood. And so we're gonna start off with a couple simple ingredients. Very simple sauce. There's a couple small twists to it, but we use some onion, some garlic, little red pepper I use for a little sweetness in here. We use some San Marzano tomatoes, very, very important. Some tomato paste, some salt, some good olive oil, black pepper, little chili, and then we have some herbs, some oregano and some basil to finish off. So we're gonna start off with a bell pepper, okay? So we're gonna start off with the bell pepper. We're gonna finely dice this up. And remember that, you know, it doesn't necessarily have to be perfect dice, just because at the end of the day, we're gonna end up blending it, okay? Because I'm using a whole tomato rather than a crushed tomato. So let's just give this a dice. So my Nana would use a fresh tomato with this a lot of times in the earlier days when I was much younger, and she would always peel the tomatoes. So you want to make sure if you are going to be making a red sauce, you peel the tomatoes and you blanch the tomatoes first. I like to use whole San Marzano canned tomatoes. Make sure they're San Marzano. San Marzano tends to be picked when they're ripe. And the sugar content is a little bit higher. So rather than a lot of canned tomato products, they pick them when they're unripe. So that sugar content really hasn't formed. So it's a very more acidic product. So just gonna heat this up on a medium heat. Let's get an onion going as well. All right, so let's get that nice and warm. Now you can easily do this without oil, but it is not Nana's sauce without a good olive oil in there. All right, so we start off with olive oil, add some onion. I'm gonna add the pepper at the same time. All right, so the onions and peppers have been sauteing for a little while here. I have the garlic. I like my, oh my God, my goddamn knife. I like my, my garlic thinly sliced, and I like a lot of garlic in this, okay? So I'm gonna thinly slice it. It is gonna get blended up, so it doesn't necessarily matter, but you know, having some thin slices of garlic in there really just brings out so much flavor, and it's just such a key component with red sauce. All right, adding some garlic in there. I'm gonna add a little bit of oregano at this early stage. So I use oregano. Oregano is in the hardy herb category. And when I use hardy herbs like oregano or thyme or rosemary, I like to add them early. So that way it brings out all those essential oils and the most flavor out of that herb. All right, so just like with most sauces, most soups, particularly sauces, I like to build flavor. This is all these different levels of flavor and all these different steps. Every step adds a level of flavor to a dish, to this dish in particular. So I don't want to get too much color on the onions and the peppers. I'm creating that caramelization, really sweating it out, but not getting a ton of color. And that slower saute is bringing out that much more sugar in them, all right? You can also add a little bit of chili. I like to add just a touch of chili flake in there, just to get a very small bite, right? At this point, I'm gonna season a bit with some salt and some pepper. We're gonna go back to it and season it when it is done, but I like that, seasoning in this early stage because it also releases a lot of the water content from these ingredients in here. Help during this first step. All right, so next I have some San Marzano tomatoes, all right? They're whole tomatoes, I'm just adding them in. All right. I have 2 cans. I'm gonna have some water. Let's do probably half of a can of water. I have tomato paste. All right, we're gonna add that water. Perfect size pot for this one. All right, we're just gonna stir that up and we're gonna keep it on low in this sauce. As I'm stirring it, I'm just gonna chop up those tomatoes just so they release a lot of their juices in here. So I'm gonna keep this on a low heat. I'm gonna put the lid on. I'm gonna bring it up to a simmer. Make sure I stir it quite frequently. And this is going to reduce for, I would say, 45 minutes to an hour. Okay, depending on how juicy the tomatoes are, that could vary slightly. And I'll show you the thickness that we'd be looking for when the sauce is ready to blend. All right, so the slow cooking process is what really concentrates all those flavors, all the sweetness in the tomatoes, the sweetness of the peppers. A lot of people tend to add a little bit of sugar to their tomato sauce. And the reason that a lot of folks do that is because they're using a more acidic tomato, okay? So I like to use these red peppers. My Nana used to use red peppers for that sweetness in the early stage. Instead of reaching for some sugar, you can also do shredded carrots in the early stage as well. And once you saute those up with the onions and the garlic, those start to almost melt, and so that sweetness comes out, so you don't have to reach for that sugar with the sauce. But again, choosing the right canned tomato product is absolutely critical for a good red sauce. So we're gonna put the lid on here. We're gonna bring it up to a simmer on low. We're gonna check it, stir it up a little bit, and we're gonna continue cooking it for 45 minutes to an hour, so we'll be right back. All right, so this has been simmering for a good 25 to 30 minutes on the stove. Let's check it out. You wanna make sure that you are stirring it occasionally, okay? So I have been stirring this probably every 5 minutes as I'm making other recipes, but you can see it is starting to thicken up. As I stir it, I break up those whole tomatoes as well, and it just smells so freaking good. This is what brings me back to childhood, this recipe right here. It is so good. Cannot wait for you guys to try it. All right, so this has been on the stove for a good hour, 15, hour and a half. All right, so let's check it out. It has reduced. Remember when I filled this up, right when it went on the stove, it was almost to the top, okay? It was probably half an inch from the top. So it's reduced, in this pot, it's reduced probably about an inch. So you can see though, you can see that it's thickened up. And as I was stirring every maybe 10, 15 minutes, I was breaking up those tomatoes. So you can easily keep this very chunky, okay, like a very rustic sauce. I'm gonna hit it with a handheld blender just to pulse it a little bit. I still like some texture in there, a little bit of consistency in there. I don't want a smooth sauce at all, but I am gonna blend that up just a little bit. So that consistency is what I'm looking for. I want it coarse. I do not want it smooth. And let's try this out. This is when you finish the seasoning here. So let's try it out here. Oh my gosh, that is so good. That is so good. It needs a little bit more salt. A little bit more salt to finish. All right. Has that nice sweetness from the bell pepper. Now, when I'm in restaurants, and if you go to an Italian restaurant, this is what happens. So they always finish sauce with olive oil. So I'm just adding a bit of olive oil to the end of this recipe. You can obviously leave it out, but I love finishing the sauce with olive oil. And it is so freaking delicious, you guys. All right, so I'm gonna finish this with a little bit of fresh basil. I like a tomato basil sauce. You can leave this out if you wish, if you're just making a base sauce. If you're doing a pizza sauce, keep it more higher in oregano. But I like fresh basil. I'm gonna coarse chop this up. Okay, I'm not gonna load it up with basil, but I'm gonna add a little bit in here, just kind of coarse chop. And notice that I've taken it off the heat. I've taken it off the heat before adding these herbs. So because basil is a little bit more delicate than oregano, I'm adding it at the very end. Okay, just to give that burst of freshness, and in goes that basil. Yes. And there you have it. So good. The smells in the kitchen now, cooking down that sauce. Fresh pasta and red sauce just makes me really friggin' happy. So whenever I make a fresh batch, I will always put it in jars. You know, this is something that you can can if you're into canning, as I mentioned, or just keep this for a good 5 days in the fridge. But I will put it in jars, and it is just so beautiful. And there's nothing better than opening up a jar of fresh sauce that you made and that you cooked down to feature it with your favorite pasta dish, okay? So I have enough for probably about 4 or 5 jars here. This is a couple meals worth, but it is just so good. I wish you could smell it. And the key to making this sauce absolutely delicious is don't rush the process, okay? This is a slow food, so you definitely want to slow cook it, all right? So this has been cooking probably total from the moment I started the pan, probably about 1.5 hours, maybe a little bit more. It can certainly simmer a little bit more and cook it down. If you're using fresh tomatoes that are peeled, you obviously need to cook those down probably about another half hour to an hour to really concentrate those sugars. This is good to go. It's ready to serve with pasta. So hope you enjoy it. So thank you guys so much for joining us on this video. One of my favorite all-time sauces. This is Nana's gravy. This is a Sarno recipe. Hope you all enjoy it like we do. Thank you so much, you guys. See you next time. But yeah, no matter what time of day, you could walk into my Nana's house and there would always be a pot of sauce on the stove. And it was something that you could always count on to have fresh sauce every time you went to go visit.